To Mr. James Elphinston, September the 25th, 1750. Dear Sir, you have, as I find by every kind of evidence, lost an excellent mother, and I hope you will not think me incapable of partaking of your grief. I have a mother, now 82 years of age, whom, therefore, I must soon lose, unless it please God that she rather should mourn for me. I read the letters in which you relate your mother's death to Mrs. Strahan, and I think I do myself honor when I tell you that I read them with tears. But tears are neither to you nor to me of any further use, when once the tribute of nature has been paid. The business of life summons us away from useless grief, and calls us to exercise of those virtues of which we are lamenting our deprivation. The greatest benefit which one friend can confer upon another is to guard and excite and elevate his virtues. This your mother will still perform, if you diligently preserve the memory of her life and of her death, a life, so far as I can learn, useful, wise, and innocent, and a death resigned, peaceful, and holy. I cannot forbear to mention that neither reason nor revelation denies you to hope that you may increase her happiness by obeying her precepts, and that she may, in her present state, look with pleasure upon every act of virtue to which her instructions or example have contributed. Whether this be more than a pleasing dream, or just an opinion of separate spirits, is, indeed, of no great importance to us, when we consider ourselves as acting under the eye of God. Yet, surely, there is something pleasing in the belief that our separation from those whom we love is merely corporeal, and it may be a great incitement to virtuous friendship, if it can be made probable, that that union which has received the divine approbation shall continue to eternity. There is one expedient by which you may, to some degree, continue her presence. If you write down minutely what you remember of her from your earliest years, you will read it with great pleasure, and receive from it many hints of soothing recollection, when time shall remove her yet farther from you, and your grief shall be matured to veneration. To this, however painful for the present, I cannot but advise you, as to a source of comfort and satisfaction in that time to come. For all comfort and all satisfaction is sincerely wished you by, dear sir, your most obliged, most obedient, and most humble servant, Samuel Johnson. The Rambler has increased in fame as an age. Soon after its first folio edition was concluded, it was published in 6 duodecimo volumes, and its author lived to see 10 numerous editions of it in London, besides those of Ireland and Scotland. I profess myself to have ever entertained a profound veneration for the astonishing force and vivacity of mind which the Rambler exhibits. That Johnson had penetration enough to see, and seeing would not disguise, the general misery of man in this state of being, may have given rise to the superficial notion of his being too stern a philosopher. But men of reflection will be sensible that he has given a true representation of human existence, and that he has, at the same time, with a generous benevolence displayed every consolation which our state affords us, not only those arising from the hopes of futurity, but such as may be obtained in the immediate progress through life. He has not depressed the soul to despondency and indifference. He has everywhere inculcated study, labor, and exertion. Nay, he has shown, in a very odious light, a man whose practice is to go about darkening the views of others by perpetual complaints of evil, and awakening those considerations of danger and distress which are, for the most part, lulled into a quiet oblivion. This he has done very strongly in his character of Suspirius, from which Goldsmith took that of Croker in his comedy of The Good-Natured Man, as Johnson told me he acknowledged to him, and which is, indeed, very obvious. To point out the numerous subjects which the Rambler treats, with the dignity and perspicuity which are there united in a manner which we shall in vain look for anywhere else, would take up too large a portion of my book, and would, I trust, be superfluous, considering how universally those volumes are now disseminated. Even the most condensed and brilliant sentences which they contain, and which have very properly been selected under the name of beauties, are of considerable bulk. But I may shortly observe that the Rambler furnishes such an assemblage of discourses on practical religion and moral duty, of critical investigations, and allegorical and oriental tales, that no mind can be thought very deficient that has, by constant study and meditation, assimilated to itself all that may be found there. Number 7, written in Passion Week, on abstraction and self-examination, and number 110, on penitence and the placability of the divine nature, cannot be too often read. Number 54, on the effect which the death of a friend should have upon us, though rather too dispiriting, may be occasionally very medicinal to the mind. Everyone must suppose the writer to have been deeply impressed by a real scene, but he told me that was not the case, which shows how well his fancy could conduct him to the house of mourning. Some of these more solemn papers, I doubt not, particularly attracted the notice of Dr. Young, the author of The Night Thoughts, of whom my estimation is such as to reckon his applause and honour even to Johnson. I have seen some volumes of Dr. Young's copy of the Rambler, in which he has marked the passages which he thought particularly excellent by folding down a corner of the page, and such as he rated in a supereminent degree are marked by double folds. I am sorry that some of the volumes are lost. Johnson was pleased when told of the minute attention with which Young had signified his approbation of his essays. I will venture to say that in no writings whatever can be found more bark and steel for the mind, if I may use the expression, more that can brace and invigorate every manly and noble sentiment. Number 32, on patience, even under extreme misery, is wonderfully lofty, and as much above the rant of Stoicism as the sun of revelation is brighter than the twilight of pagan philosophy. I never read the following sentence without feeling my frame thrill. I think there is some reason for questioning whether the body and mind are not so proportioned that the one can bear all which can be inflicted on the other, whether virtue cannot stand its ground as long as life, and whether a soul well principled will not be sooner separated than subdued. Though instruction be the predominant purpose of the Rambler, yet it is enlivened with a considerable portion of amusement. Nothing could be more erroneous than the notion which some persons have entertained that Johnson was then a retired author, ignorant of the world, and of consequence that he wrote only from his imagination when he described characters and manners. He said to me that before he wrote that work he had been running about the world, as he expressed it, more than almost anybody, and I have heard him relate with much satisfaction that several of the characters in the Rambler are drawn so naturally that when it first circulated in numbers, a club in one of the towns of Essex imagined themselves to be severally exhibited in it, and were much incensed against a person who, they suspected, had thus made them objects of public notice. Nor were they quieted till authentic assurance was given them that the Rambler was written by a person who had never heard of any one of them. Some of the characters are believed to have been actually drawn from life, particularly that of Prospero, from Garrick, who never entirely forgave its pointed satire. For instances of fertility of fancy and accurate description of real life, I appeal to number 19, a man who wanders from one profession to another with most plausible reasons for every change. Number 34, female fastidiousness and timorous refinement. Number 82, a virtuoso who has collected curiosities. Number 88, petty modes of entertaining a company and conciliating kindness. Number 182, fortune hunting. Numbers 194 to 195, a tutor's account of the follies of his pupil. Numbers 197 to 198, legacy hunting. He has given a specimen of his nice observation of the mere external appearances of life in the following passage in number 179, against affectation, that frequent and most disgusting quality. He that stands to contemplate the crowds that fill the streets of a populous city will see many passengers whose air and motion it will be difficult to behold without contempt and laughter. But if he examine what are the appearances that thus powerfully excite his risibility, he will find among them neither poverty nor disease, nor any involuntary or painful defect. The disposition